Hi everyone. With this video, what I'll be doing is a let's play or a walkthrough through this video game that I've heard some very good things about, which is the all-text choose-your-own-adventure game called Hollywood Visionary by Aaron A. Reed. And this is a game from the year 2015, which is a relatively recent game, but it does have the all-text format. And what I'll be doing is I'll be going through this, and as someone who has taught quite a bit at universities, courses on Hollywood history and the Hollywood industry, I thought I'd take a look at this and see how this game represents the industry, because it does have that as its setting. So it's going to be set in what is defined as the Hollywood industry, and the idea is for the player character to succeed in coming up with a production for the Hollywood industry. And now I have not played this game before, and so what I'll be curious to see how it's putting across the industry and also the choices that the player character is going to be making. But my plan is, since this is a choose your own adventure format, my assumption is that there are choices you can make that are very good choices and choices you can make that are very bad choices. And what I'm going to try to do is, depending on how long it takes to go through the entire game once, my plan is to go through it twice with you all. And the first time would be to make what I would think would be all of the wrong choices. And then in the second playthrough, I would make what I think are all the right choices. And then just see how the game responds to this kind of thinking about the choices that it's presenting. And as I'm doing this, so I'm not going to be reading this whole thing as we go, because that could be very time consuming. And since it's on your screen, you can of course read it yourself. I will probably sort of narrate what it is that is being presented, and then the choices that I make and why I make those choices, and then probably make some comments about what is being represented here and what I think it's saying about the Hollywood industry as we go on. But why don't we just get started with this? And now we can see the situation that is presented to us here. We are someone at a movie studio, and we've worked here for 10 years. And it looks like we have a meeting with Lloyd Krogan, who is the head of the studio. And you can see how the studio head is being presented here as started as a shoeshine boy and built a Hollywood empire from the timbers up. And we, the character, have 60 seconds to pitch him our dream project, the movie we always wanted to make. Now, this game doesn't say specifically when this is set, but I gather from what we're seeing here that this is not the contemporary Hollywood industry we're talking about. You have this image of the studio head who seems to be someone who is of the people, like someone who rose up from shoeshine boy to a studio head. Well, that's really kind of an old-fashioned idea of what a studio head would be, something you'd see in old Hollywood. Maybe something like in the movie The Artist from 2011. If you've seen that movie, you remember that's set in the Hollywood industry during the silent period, like the late 1920s to the early 1930s. And you remember in that movie, you have a character, the movie studio head, played by John Goodman, who is this like cigar chomping vulgarian, but someone who is of the people, like someone who understands the people, the mass audience. Unlike today, where someone who is a studio head today would probably have a very different background, would probably be the graduate of an elite business school of some kind. According to what we're seeing here, it looks like this studio head is making decisions based on his gut instinct. And so we have to pitch this idea to someone like this, as opposed to today's system, where a studio head is not so much relying on their gut instinct as they are on market research that is done by the conglomerate system that surrounds this person. But anyway, let's just assume, though, that because we have to make decisions, right, based on what's right or wrong in this scenario. And unless the game says otherwise, I'm going to assume that this is just a made up contemporary studio. But if we're told at some point that this is, say, 1931 or something like that, then I will adjust my decision-making process, because of course the industry of today is very different from the industry of the past. So let's assume this is of today. And we have the man behind the desk. someone who's smoking a cigar. We've got that image of the cigar chomping vulgarian riffling through box office reports. So very interested in money. Wants to make money, not too interested in art, right? How to get his attention. So what's the wrong thing to do? Wait for him to notice me. That would be certainly the wrong thing to do. So let's click yes. We stand awkwardly, and then the mogul, with distaste, says, yes, pitch me. Doesn't say my name, we assume he's forgotten it. And then I try to stay calm. So he's bored. He wants to be thrilled. Now, this is something that is a good way, I think, to present this as drama in which we are in somewhat in a game scenario of how do we win this meeting. And it's the Hollywood industry of today has what you would call a whole para industry based around how to make it, how to with what consultants and even professors at universities like trying to teach younger people or people outside the industry how to get in, how to make it. There's a whole para industry around this: books, videos, like coaching of sorts. Like how do you get in? And it's interesting to have this as the way. Like how do you say the right thing to make the right person say yes? That's really what it boils down to, right? So what have we got for this? The option is to breathe. So we're going to breathe. Loading. All right, we have to pick our genre. Again, assuming this is 2021, what genre would be the worst decision here? I would say a comedy. A comedy is probably the dumbest thing to pitch to a major studio today because it's simply not a thriving genre. So let's say comedy. Bad choice. A real knee slapper. And then you want to say whether there's a subgenre, a qualifier, or that's all there is to know. Let's add a subgenre to this because you always want to confuse things when you're making the wrong choices. So what do we hybridize the comedy with? Let's hybridize it with a musical, another dead genre. A Western might also be good, like as a dead genre. But musicals are certainly dead at this point, with a few spectacular exceptions. So let's say musical. Oh, actually, romantic. That might be actually a better one. The romantic comedy genre is basically in its death throes at the moment. So why don't we say that? It's a romantic comedy. It's a romance too, but wait, there's more. Oh, that's all there is to know about the genre. Wait, there's more. Yes, let's add more to this. This bad idea, a romantic comedy that is controversial. Controversial. Bad choice to be controversial. You might think religious, that might be the worst choice to make here. But actually, that would be something that would appeal, I think, to a studio head because something that's religious would, in fact, have a market. There is market research that says if you have a work that is strongly religious, you would have a market for that, right? Whereas a controversial romantic comedy, no market whatsoever. So that's bad. All right, get some people talking, get some press. Yeah, studio heads don't want press of this kind. They don't want to hear controversy about what they're making. The mogul's eyes, a controversial mogul's eyebrows twitch. A controversial romantic comedy. He's leaning back. Go on. His smile is more dangerous than the frown. He's enjoying this. Why he hasn't called security yet is shocking to me. So now I need an angle that will grab him. Maybe the setting. The story takes place. Now, the setting isn't really, I don't think that's a very crucial thing, but I would say that that something of a rather exotic setting is a bad idea here. And let's say the exotic streets of Morocco. See, we think we're talking about Casablanca here, but that was back in 1942. That certainly won't work today. A controversial romantic comedy set in the exotic streets of Morocco. That sounds so bad. Krogan's face is impassive. Our cast. Obviously, well, that might be interesting. Like, do we want to have a man and a woman would be a typical romantic comedy. Two men, two women. Well, that would actually be good. I mean, that would be a refreshing way to do romantic comedy with two men or two women. An ensemble, yeah, that would be bad. An ensemble. You want a star. you want a star persona to sell tickets to a movie that doesn't have a very strong concept or a very appealing location. So we have an ensemble here, no stars. A motley group who must, and then now here's this looks like what we will have as the plot. To find themselves, to sacrifice everything, succumb to the scourge of an uncaring universe. That sounds terrible. Let's do that. They will succumb to the scourge of an uncaring universe, meaning it's a romantic comedy with an unhappy ending, which is exactly what a romantic comedy is not. A romantic comedy is supposed to have a happy ending. Romantic drama, that can have a tragic ending, something like Titanic. You want your audience to be crying into their popcorn by the end of a romantic drama. But our goal is to have a romantic comedy with an unhappy ending. Terrible idea. But let's do that. So here we go. A controversial romantic comedy set in the exotic streets of Morocco. It's about a motley group who must succumb to the scourge of an uncaring universe. Great. Sounds like Casablanca with laughs and everyone gets shot at the end. Sounds great, doesn't it? Throw in something about the appeal. On the screen, the story plays out. Fun for the whole family? No. Like nothing you've ever seen before. There we go. That's a terrible thing to say to a mogul. Like nothing you've ever seen before. First of all, it assumes that the person you're talking to is stupid and doesn't know anything. Whereas the person you're trying to talk to sell them something, you have to treat them as the smartest person you've ever talked to, that they know everything and that they are the ones who are going to guide what it is that you're doing. If you talk to them like you already know what they know, then you're being quite arrogant, and that is a total turnoff to, part of what it comes to doing something, and this goes for any industry, I would say. If you need at least three things to succeed in any industry. You need some kind of talent, some kind of natural affinity for the industry that you're in. You need discipline, which is that you are a hard worker, someone who does things quickly and on time. But then you also need social skills. You need the ability to work with others and to make others feel good about working with you. You don't need all those three things to have some success in the industry, but to have all of those three things, you can have a really good success in the industry. So if you talk to somebody like they're stupid and they've never seen anything like this before that you're pitching to them, all they're going to do is look at you and say, "I've heard this pitch 100 times, and you don't know what you're talking about." That's the choice we're going to make. We're going to talk to the studio head like he's never heard of anything like this before. It's possible he hasn't, but the point is, you're not supposed to say that. Don't say to someone you've never heard this before because they have. All right, but we're going to say that because that's the wrong choice. Now for the cast, you want friends of mine. We'll save on budget. Well, that's actually to say that it's going to be low budget is actually a good thing, right? You're not asking for a lot. You're just asking for an opportunity. Friends of mine. Well, all right, we're already making a bad impression. So clearly our friends are not going to enhance our pitch here. So friends of mine. A controversial romantic comedy set in the exotic streets of Morocco. It's about a motley group who must succumb to the scourge of an uncaring universe. The story's like nothing you've ever seen before, and the cast will be talented, low-cost unknowns. Oh boy, 20 seconds pass with nothing in response. And now we say we have years of experience. I guess we have 10 years of experience at this studio. There is something missing here, okay? And I think this is important. What's missing here is, first of all, Krogan is not saying to us, or not asking us, why are we here? Like, how do we get this meeting? Who do we know that made this meeting possible? That is really what gets you in the door, and it's who you know. You don't necessarily have to be somebody's best friend or related to somebody through like a blood relation, but it helps to have some kind of reference when you're walking in the door, so you have some kind of common connection so we kick off a discussion. But if you're just walking off, if you're basically coming in from nowhere, or I've been working here for 10 years, we've never spoken before, and now you have to listen to me. There's a middle person that seems to be missing here. So I'm not quite sure. This is more of a fantasy of a Hollywood industry, not so much not so much reality. But anyway, we are pitching our experience, and we are going to say we have natural talent. Natural talent at what? Let's say we have natural talent at editing, because editing is, of course, something that has nothing to do with writing, directing, acting, or producing, which are the most important things when it comes to putting together a project. Uh, and though it doesn't come naturally to me, I've also worked hard to become a skilled a skilled writer. Yeah, great. To say I'm not a natural writer, but I worked hard to become skilled at it. Yeah, no one's going to listen to you at this point. No one should be listening to my player character at this point. And then to not mention that I'm not good at something like directing, acting, or producing. I am not good at producing. Clearly, I am not good at producing. And what do you say? So I lean back, I'm done. So now my fate is in his hands. Krogan puffs his cigar, steeples his fingers. Again, this is old Hollywood cliched stuff. Now I'm having feelings about Krogan, and I'm suspecting Krogan never liked me. And now I guess here's where we choose our pronouns. I guess now we're figuring out who we are as we do this. Yeah, so now the game is telling us more about ourselves. And so we're learning about ourselves here, that we are someone who is generally off the stage, off the public stage. This creates some confusion and resentment in others. And it looks like this situation is shaping up to be one of those. And we have Krogan saying, well, this is a charming pitch, but quite impossible. There's no room in our schedule. And then we need to now resurrect this meeting. And we can either say next year, or we're going to challenge him and say, do you really want to turn out the same crap over and over again? Or if I could just say a little more about it. Okay, now that's the bad response, to say, I want you to hear more. His face sharpens. No, I've heard quite enough. Your idea is sloppy. It's confusing, unpolished, and off the deep end. This is not the kind of picture we make here. This is not a picture that anyone would make. There's no market for it. No guarantee of return on investment. My dear, it's the 1950s. Okay, finally, we figure out when we are here. It's the 1950s. I guess the choices we made so far also somewhat apply in this case, where, I mean, we're in the post-war era where the studios are now competing with not only television, but also with the theaters. They no longer own the theaters that they could simply use as the destination for all the movies they were producing. So they have to make fewer films than they were during the heyday of the classical Hollywood period. And so each movie has to be a little more curated, has to be a little more fussed over. It has to appeal to the broadest possible audience. Every movie has to be a family-oriented production. At the same time, though, you're competing with television, and so you want to show things to the audiences that television can't. And that means we have to do something that is somewhat risky. You have to do something that is somehow that is bigger, that is louder, that is, more on a scale of a movie rather than something that's small scale for a television. And there's also a mention here of the political environment that we're in, which is partly what is going on nationally, which is an anti-communist movement that is driving a lot of aspects of industry, including the Hollywood industry. So it's acknowledged here that now the studio system no longer has a monopoly on what movies are made. There's government pressure, there's pressure from competing with television, and so it said here, we must be canny and ruthless, efficient and predictable. But it's good to know where we are now. We're in the 1950s, and the movie we chose to make here, which is a romantic comedy set in the streets of Morocco with an unhappy ending, an ensemble cast of nobodies, by a beginner who's never made a movie before, is simply a terrible idea. So Krogan says, there's no place in this modern system for your little comic lark. It would be a disaster. Good day. I agree. Now we are prepared for this rejection, and I like this. This is good. We're building our own character here, and we have to now respond in the moment to this rejection. And we are convinced this idea is not a disaster. It's a revelation. It deserves to be made. It will be made. That's admirable. Like, that kind of enthusiasm in the face of such rejection is quite admirable. The idea of never quit, like never surrender, don't have a backup plan, because if you have a backup plan, at the slightest moment of rejection, you're going to give up your dream and go for your backup plan. But now that's good advice for a beginner. But this player character is not a beginner. This is someone who's been in the studio for 10 years. And my theory about careers is if you've been doing something for 10 years, you need to make a decision whether to continue doing that for the rest of your life and simply rise up in the ranks within where you are, or do something else. In this case, I would say doing something else would be the best thing to do after 10 years of this. And this is what you've got, as your pitch, a completely off base idea. So do you say I quit, or I quit? Let's go with the all caps I quit. We rant about all the brilliant ideas that die in suit stuffed offices. Endless B movie filler. We're now just basically. It sounds like the player character just had this head of steam walking into the office and just as if the point of this meeting was not really to have a successful pitch, but to make such a crazy pitch that it will be rejected, and then this gives us the opening in which to just blurt out all of our grievances and all of our frustrations about the industry. And then now it looks like we are standing up for ourselves and walking out and saying we are going to start our own studio and make this movie. And then we meet the elevator boy who escorted us in, and it looks like he's very impressed with our appearance, which is we are, you know, we made a strong impression on the elevator boy. you know, he says that must have been some pitch. Yeah, it was some pitch, all right. Now, 1 year later, all right. Now that was all prologue. So this is basically our independence from the studio. And there's some good history here about what happened in 1948 when the Supreme Court ruled against the Hollywood industry, forcing it to divest itself of one of its major components, and it turned out to be exhibition. And it's the day of the independence. So this is the beginning of the independent studio system. Independent movie making wasn't the way we think of independent movie making today, which is you're thinking of more like non-professionals or those who aren't in the industry who never were in the industry, sort of making a movie together and showing it through, let's say, the film festival circuit or distributing on home video or something like that as a way to break in or to have a success. Whereas this period we're talking about, the early post-war period, there's this bridging period between the classic studio system and the post-classical, where you have stars like people who were very successful in this classic system, particularly stars like star actors and actresses and producers and directors. They would go out and start their own companies because not only was the studio system giving up all of its exhibition, it also had to give up its contract system that was having all of the people who made movies for the studios basically locked into these 7 year contracts that they could not escape. With the collapse of that, now you're able to have like stars and star directors and star producers making their own companies and then financing those productions that they came up with themselves through the studios. So the studios would a lot of times have relationships or one-off deals with these now independent stars and directors and producers to make movies that the studios could finance and then distribute. But now we think of independent movie making in a very different way. Now it's almost like, okay, if you can get money together somehow through some kind of financing, then you can make a movie and have it be seen, and then people will discover you that way. Yeah, so it looks like what we're doing here is we're bridging that a little bit. Like we have someone who's at this studio who is a nobody at the studio, but has 10 years experience, so has built a lot of contacts. And so now by leaving the studio, using those contacts, we can, I guess, kind of form an independent company. The independents who started their own companies outside of the studio system at this time were generally dedicated to low budget productions and low budget and also quite exploitative productions. making low budget movies that had a lot of action and a lot of sex and violence that would sell to, let's say, the drive-in circuit, or to sell as double bills to theaters that needed content. So the studio system, as it was, what is described here as the lumbering giant, right? They were making far fewer movies because they needed to guarantee that every one of their movies would be released in some way. And the fewer they made, then the more likelihood there is that 100% of their slate could be distributed to these now independently owned movie theaters. But now these independently owned movie theaters had their screens, right? But not enough content from all the studios now who are making far fewer movies, to fill those screens. So now you got these independent filmmakers coming in, making low budget productions that now could fill those screens. And that's a good way, I think, to explain where we are here. So this is a good way to frame the history here, where we are. But is our player character going to succeed in that? Let's see. So we are opening our studio on Poverty Row, but somehow we got the financing together to start this company. And we have a personal assistant. This is kind of a Jerry Maguire kind of scenario here, where we managed to walk out of the studio with a loyal assistant, but someone who's meticulous and efficient. And now we see this is kind of somewhat of an eccentric person, and this is also, I think, remember the movie Sunset Boulevard? It's somewhat connected to that as well, where you have this idea of these characters who are in the industry who are all a little eccentric, and they all have their little idiosyncrasies, but they have different levels of talent, right? You have people who are extremely talented, who are very eccentric, and then you have people with very little talent who manage to have amazing success. That's one of the ironies of the system. There's a very famous quote by the late screenwriter William Goldman, which is that nobody knows anything. This is a quote about the Hollywood industry. Nobody knows anything. And that's probably the truest thing you'll ever hear said about Hollywood. Because if anyone knew anything, then every movie would be an amazing success. But that's not the case, because nobody knows anything. Now, are we going to give our assistant a name? Let's give our assistant a name, a custom name. Enter the assistant's name. Let's call the assistant Zemi. Confirm the assistant's name. Okay, so now we choose our own name. What is our last name? All right, let's do a custom name here. Enter my last name. Let's put in Flack. I like Flack. It's a good last name. Here we are at the studio. Somehow our production seems to be in process. This must be the downer romantic comedy musical set in Morocco. The whirling mayhem of this production. I guess it's in motion here. How we did this, I have no idea, but it looks like we are in it. Now we encounter a truck that almost runs us over. Or I'll just call my character Flack. So Flack is almost run over by a truck, and the truck driver helps us out. How do we want the employees to address you, Western? Yeah, this form of address, I mean, to me, this is something that is more of a contemporary thing, like being able to choose how people can address us and how we address ourselves. Like, this is certainly something of our time, of our contemporary time. So I guess we're bridging, the present and the past here. So let's go ahead with the less gendered form of address. Dr. Flack. Ooh. Dr. Flack is a pretty good way to alienate yourself from people in show business. Make them refer to you as doctor. Yeah, Colonel Flack might be. No, actually, Colonel is kind of fun. People probably have fun with that. But doctor, I don't know. Yeah, Dr. Flack. I'm going to be very arrogant and insist that people call me Dr. Flack. And Dr. Flack, the truck driver, is scared of me, thinks he's going to get fired. And yeah, that's the wrong thing to do, is to just fire somebody who has an accident. That's kind of a jerk thing to do. So let's do that. We're going to fire the truck driver for no fault of his own, because I am a tyrant. Dr. Flack is a prick, basically. As if that wasn't already obvious in the meeting with Krogan back there, where we basically tell Krogan that his studio sucks. But we're setting an example, I guess, is the choice here. I like how the narrative kind of bends with our choice, like kind of takes our side, even though it's clearly the wrong thing to do. It says it's important to set an example right from the start, and the kind of ship we're running here. When people do this, when people get into power, this happens to some people. They could be the nicest people you've ever known, but once they get some power, and usually like in an industry that everyone wants to be in, right? A very competitive kind of industry. Some people, as soon as they get a little bit of power in that industry, they can't handle it. They just can't. They feel like, okay, they wanted it so badly that now they think everyone else wants it really badly, and so everyone else is gunning for you to fail. So the way to respond to that fear is just to treat everyone like garbage. So they're all afraid of you. You know, and this some people just do this, and but it's always the wrong thing to do. Like to treat people like they're less than you just because you've had a little success. I mean, to me, that's just a response to an inner fear of failure. But it's just a projection. Like if you assume everyone's gunning for you, really, you just think you don't deserve what you have, right? It's kind of an inner doubt there that's coming out. So yeah, I've just fired the truck driver and Dr. Flack. The truck driver still calls me Dr. Flack as he drives off towards the office to collect his final paycheck. I'm so awful. Zemi actually backs me up here. I think you did what's best for the studio. Let's have a custom first name as well. Enter my first name. Let's do Daisy. Daisy Flack. Like that. Daisy Flack. That's a good name, I think, for a studio head. Daisy Flack. Yeah. It's got edges to it, right? And it's got a nice thing, and like a daisy, a nice flower, and then flack, like is almost a military term there. Now we're going to go to our warehouse. A visitor is here on C stage. Says it's top priority. Who dares disturb us? On the way, we see a kid and a woman who's out of place. Well, it's our long lost sister, Romana. It looks like Romana wanted a life of luxury, but made too many impulsive, hot-headed decisions. She's had 3 spouses and 3 divorces. Was with a wealthy aristocrat from a tiny European country, and she flew off and lived in a castle. All right, interesting. Romana. I like Romana. Romana sounds like someone I should make a movie about instead of my crazy, romantic comedy, my downer romantic comedy. So am I going to swallow my pride, keep it neutral, or yeah, I guess even Europe couldn't stand you. Yeah, let's just start off on the wrong foot here. Yeah, I guess even Europe couldn't stand you, Romana. She's not going to take the bait. She read all about me, Little Daisy, with her own movie studio. How industrious. All right, do I want to let my guard down for Romana, right? And it looks like so we are in California, so we know where we are. We're in Los Angeles, and Romana's got a place up on Mulholland. That's Mulholland Drive, and has a child with her, a niece. Should we be no nonsense about this, or be formal, or let's I don't know what the wrong choice here would be, or for our character who's kind of awful. I suppose saying hello with a stern nod is in character, but it's almost like I think this character, the niece, might turn out to be an agent of change for Daisy Flack. Maybe make Daisy Flack think differently about things, and maybe in a better way. Kind of starts as a jerk, turns into a wonderful person because of this kind-hearted niece who is thrust into the scene here. So let's maintain character here by saying hello with a stern nod, no nonsense. All right, so interesting here. Now we can choose some of our costume or some of our makeup and props for Daisy Flack. What would be really off-putting? I think a bow tie would be quite off-putting. Yeah, bow tie, not a good look. And now we can choose a pattern for the bow tie. It's an interesting choice here, right? Polka dots, always good, right? Polka dot bow tie. The niece is challenging us as she should. I'm going to say I've always worn it. own this bow tie. So you can see how the niece is sort of pulling at our heartstrings, right? It's kind of is really supporting everything we're saying. Like, so she likes the bow tie, although she really shouldn't. And now the niece is asking us about what kind of lights we use. And now we're getting some history here of shooting pictures in Technicolor. Eastman has a new stock. I mean, this is all astonishing coming from a 10-year-old. But these are interesting things to look at. The technology of movie making of this time. And it is a bit of nostalgia, I think, in this approach to technology, especially talking about Technicolor, which at the time, I mean, if you're not familiar with Technicolor, it is a 3-strip process where you don't just have one film strip running through the camera. You have basically 3 strips, each one representing a different primary color, like red, green, and blue. And then when the processing happens, you're able to isolate certain colors in the post processing that make the colors super saturated. And if you've ever seen a fully restored Technicolor movie from this period, it is absolutely beautiful. You've never seen colors like this in your life. I don't know if we're using, it looks like we are using Technicolor for our production, which is good. I mean, that's a nice thing. And that's certainly something you did not get on television at home. Television, we did not yet have color televisions in the home in the early 1950s. We are amazed at what the 10-year-old seems to know about movie making technology. But that's I mean, there are very precocious people in the industry who just they grow up in the industry and they just know all this stuff. Okay, so what is the name of our niece? I don't think there's a right or wrong choice here. So let's just use the top choice here, Josie. I don't think it matters really. So Josie. And Josie does seem like a precocious child, spends a lot of time at the theater. And can Josie visit us? She'll be no trouble. Now, so now what is the choice here? Like, it says this is a tough call. It is a tough call. I think no matter what we say here, that Josie's going to come to the set. But I guess for our presentation of character, like what is more consistent? The plan here is to fail, right? These are all the wrong choices that we want to make. So let's just invite her to come on the stage whenever she wants. We'll have the crew keep an eye on her. Yeah, that's I'm not a very responsible manager here, right? I mean, I might be a visionary, like Daisy Flack might be a visionary, but certainly can't really see things for what they are. So, yeah, Josie can come anytime she wants. And it looks like Josie, she's seeing me, I guess, as the mother she never had, right? So it looks like Romana is a bit of a neglected mother. And so Josie's really happy and thanks Uncle Daisy. So I like that, Uncle Daisy. Oh, now I can correct Josie and say, actually, I like Uncle Daisy. I like the sound of that. Wait, I like the sound of that, but would Daisy Flack like the sound of that? Call me Flack, kid. I think that's the wrong choice here. Okay, Flack, she says. And our choice now is whether to just send them away or to keep talking to them. I guess this reflects some of the conflict that people have in the industry, choosing industry over family. I mean, this is a very common conflict that you hear from people in the industry over and over again. Just like, when they're working on something, that has to be their entire focus because the stakes are so high. There's so much money. There are so many people involved, and there are so many deadlines and responsibilities that to just say, okay, I'm going to work like an 8-hour shift 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and then that'll spend the rest of my time with my family. Like that is something that is frowned upon somewhat, unfortunately so. Like there's the work-life balance in the Hollywood industry even today. I mean, culturally speaking, it's a mess. Like there's very little support for those who want to dedicate a lot of time to their families, even while working in the industry. So wait, so maybe the wrong choice here in terms of the culture of the industry would be to spend more time with Josie and Romana, because that would probably mean that the production will have a greater chance of failure. This is the culture. This is the cultural idea here of family over job, right? So let's actually choose business can wait. I'd like to catch up with you two. Yeah, it looks like I'm making a sacrifice here. my schedule can't afford this. And so Zemi, our assistant, rushes over. Dr. Flack, there's a reporter from Variety who wants a picture. Yeah, there's stuff I need to do here. So I'm pulled away. And now there's a sign. So now we choose the name for our studio. So what would be the worst name for this company? I don't suppose there was a right or wrong choice here. I'm guessing that these are just choices that are going to fill in certain blanks in the narrative, like how this studio will be referred to. But just for our own purposes, what would be the worst name here? Probably Polka Dot Bowtie Entertainment would be the worst. Sounds like we're running like a clown costume store or something like that. All right, so some months earlier. So now we're flashing back. I guess we'll figure out how this studio came about, and that was a bit of a mystery to me, like how we managed to build this studio from basically nothing except a very alienating meeting with the head of the studio that we were working at for 10 years. So we're in a deli with someone named Grundy who's eating French fries, and so it looks like, okay, so it's building in stuff from our backstory. So we were an editor in the past. We have some skills here. So we worked with Fish Grundy, who's an amazing comedian. So obviously we are still working on our romantic comedy, and I guess we want Fish Grundy to be involved. And there is some mention here of the vaudeville background for Fish Grundy. And so we're getting some backstory of this character, Fish Grundy, who looks like represents some of these comedy stars of the period of the 20s and 30s. Someone who was in vaudeville, who it says managed to survive the transition to sound, which is one of those things. Remember the movie The Artist that really dramatized this turning point in Hollywood history when sound technology made it so the performers had to now use their voices and have their voices heard by the audiences. And a lot of those stars really couldn't survive that transition. Their voices just didn't have the quality that audiences expected or wanted. And so their careers failed. But it looks like we have someone who was a vaudeville comedian who succeeded in the transition to sound and and keeps working year in, year out. So it looks like this is someone who is respected for many years, but probably his most popular time is in the past. And he's going to help us with our script because he's a damn funny son of a bitch. Okay, that's pretty good reason to deal with someone on a comedy script. So what's my favorite lunch? What? Well, I shouldn't be spending a lot of money. So what's the most expensive thing on the menu here? A potato knish. That might be the most expensive thing. Hot pastrami on rye. That looks expensive too. So let's go with that. Let's waste money. We see somebody in the corner, and it looks like it's a writer who wrote the script for The Vanishing Ones. I think it's a fake title that almost won an Oscar, and he's blacklisted. So this writer sitting in the corner has been blacklisted for refusing to testify about supposed communist connections. And suddenly it's his so-called friends who've done The Vanishing. Wow, that's obviously a reference to the House Un-American Activities Committee that was a government organization devoted to investigating certain, let's say, bodies of industry and government for communist infiltration. So the idea is you suspect somebody of being a communist, you sit them down and force them to admit they're a communist and then say who they were associated with, and that way you will, drive out communism from various industries. Also the Hollywood industry, as it turns out. And those who testified on behalf for the government, they were rewarded in a sense by the government for their cooperation. They were in a sense allowed to keep working in the industry. But those who refused to testify, like this screenwriter here, they were basically blacklisted from the industry and not allowed to work. Obviously, if you're a performer, like it's hard to resist the blacklisting when it's your face, right? You can't pretend to be somebody else if it's your face that is who you are. Whereas writers who were blacklisted could still work. They just had to use different names, or they had people who would pretend to be the writer. So the writer would just give these what are called fronts, and and get their scripts produced that way. And this is a very ugly chapter of Hollywood history, and it's interesting to see this come up. And it looks like we're open to perhaps working with this blacklisted writer. At least that seems to be where we're going. Okay, you look back at the disgraced screenwriter falling on hard times. I mean, these blacklisted writers and blacklisted talent in Hollywood suffered greatly. I mean, a lot of them committed suicide. They were driven into poverty. It was an awful time for the industry. Like I said, a stain on Hollywood history. And so, what are we thinking here? As what's the wrong thing to think here? I mean, here's the thing. The culture of the time was if you resist testifying, you are putting your career at risk. If you cooperate with the government, your reputation among artists would probably be low. Like you would not be respected for basically ratting out friends or like cooperating with the government. Like, those who are your friends who are artists, like would look down on you, like they would judge you as being basically government agents. But in terms of your ability to have a career, like your career could continue if you cooperated with the government. So what is the wrong choice? It's an interesting choice here to make. Like, do we connect with this writer? Is that the smart thing to do? Business wise, it is not the smart thing to do based on the culture that the business was in. But morally, it is the right thing to do to reach out to this blacklisted writer. So what do we do here? I guess the wrong thing to do would be what is our goal here to making the wrong decision? Our goal is to have a completely failed production. Yeah, do we want moral failure or do we want business failure? That's an interesting choice to make. I mean, the wrong thing to do here, morally speaking, is what we're going to do here. Yeah, so good riddance. There's too many commies in this town. Yeah, so we have a character here who is a moral failure, who has basically blinders on and just doesn't understand. Or even if this person did understand the way things were, they're making the wrong choices to go about it. Just a human disaster is what we're dealing with here. So let's choose that. And there's a bit here about the communist. Yeah, a bit of backstory about the communist. The Hollywood 10. Those are the ones who refused to cooperate. The Hollywood 10. Yeah, you wish the man the best. Yeah. So in other words, we're not going to help this man who's blacklisted. We're going to take the safe route, and the moral failure of the safe route in this case, which is to not give this person an opportunity for stupid political reasons. Okay, so Fish is going to tell us basically what we're doing here. So we have the controversial romantic comedy set in Morocco about a motley group who succumbs to the scourge of an uncaring universe. The story is nothing. Yeah, are we going to stick with this idea? Yeah. So now So now we're getting reiterated our idea that we believed in so strongly that we walked out of the studio after a disastrous meeting with the studio head who thought our idea was the worst thing he'd ever heard. Are we going to stick with this idea, or are we going to come up with something else? We are sticking with this idea, of course. And Fish, marvelous. You sold me a ticket already. Fish is very generous sort of person here. Okay, so do we want something that's familiar or risky? And it says there's no wrong answer. Of course there's a wrong answer. The wrong answer, see, here's the thing. The question here is what's best for the story? There's no right answer. I mean, it's correct. Okay, there's no wrong answer. That's correct. But there's no right answer either. Remember that quote, nobody knows anything. And the fact of the matter is this whole para industry that's devoted to helping particularly young people or inexperienced people get into the industry, like get employment in the industry. I mean, they'll teach you all the quote right ways to do things and all the things not to do. Here's what you should do. Here's what you shouldn't do. But again, nobody knows anything. If you did all the things that everyone told you to do, you could still fail. On the other hand, if you did some of the things people did, but also some of the things they said you shouldn't do, you can succeed in the industry because it all boils down to relationships. It all boils down to getting the right material, meaning the right material to the right person at the right time. And by right material, it's not like you come up with some objective standard of what's right, and then you just come up with an objective standard of who the right person is, and then some objective standard of what the right time is. All of this is in flow, right? So you just have to have something that someone will like at a certain time. And in a sense, it's a gamble. It's a gamble, which makes it very interesting to be the subject of a video game, because in a sense, it's not like a video game in that you simply have rules that you follow, and if you follow those rules, you will succeed in the game. Like you can't break the rules of the game or you'll fail. There really are no rules for success in the industry. There are guidelines, there are things that you are encouraged to do. Remember, like I said, it's good to have talent, it's good to have discipline, it's good to have social skills. It's great to have all of that stuff all together. But there's no one right way to succeed. So, what's best for the story? In a way, it doesn't matter, but let's reduce our chances here to succeed by saying we are going to be uncompromisingly bold. Like nothing anyone's ever seen before, even if that risks alienating audiences. Okay. Um, dumb. Why is that dumb? Because we're nobody. We're nobody. Here's the thing. Again, it's not about the idea. It's about who has that idea and when that idea is had. So if you have a major star like James Stewart, we're talking about the early 1950s here, or a major director like Otto Preminger, right? And they have their independent companies, or even someone outside the movie industry like Frank Sinatra, major star of music, but wants to break into movies. Okay, you can have Frank Sinatra and Otto Preminger work together to make a movie about drug addiction called The Man with the Golden Arm. And you'll have scenes of Frank Sinatra, shooting up drugs in a hotel room. That's an uncompromisingly bold idea. And it was like nothing anyone's ever seen before. No one's ever seen Frank Sinatra shoot up, heroin on the screen. But here's the thing: it's Frank Sinatra and it's Otto Preminger. They can have that idea. We are Daisy Flack. We are nobody. Nobody cares about who we are. So for us to be uncompromisingly bold, it's nobody's going to pay attention to us for just that reason. If we are going to run a low budget independent studio that wants to just get movies into theaters and make a little money, we could be bold in a sense, just have a lot of sex and violence. But that's not what it says here. It says we're risking alienating audiences. Well, having a lot of sex and violence, that's not risking alienating audiences. That's actually appealing to a certain kind of audience, particularly the young teenage audience. But that's not what we're saying here. That's not what we mean by risk or being bold. So let's choose that. We're going to be uncompromisingly bold. That's disaster. That's just terrible. Now, how intellectual should it be? Packed with complex allusions and heady language, essentially intellectual. Yeah, we're going to hire, maybe get Clifford Odets to come in and write our romantic comedy. Or maybe get Faulkner if Faulkner's still around, and he can write and basically give Faulkner a green light to just do whatever you want, and we'll put it on the screen. Essentially intellectual. Bad idea. Fine. Do we want now the pace? That's the pace. It's an interesting question to bring up before you start working on a script. Like the pace, the mood, like what kind of feeling you want to have for the work, what you want the audience to feel. I would say the bad choice here is to maintain a slow, deliberate pace throughout. A slow, deliberate pace throughout. which would be more of a meditative kind of thing for the audience. Yes, a meditative romantic comedy with a downer ending set in Morocco. Oh boy. Fish frowns. Look, even Fish is who has been patient with us for this long is staring at our polka dot bow tie and beginning to have doubts. Are you sure that's what you want? Yes, I'm fine just the way that is. So now Fish says, so we have a languid, highly intellectual, iconoclastic romantic comedy as the first release from Polka Dot Bowtie Entertainment. That sound about right to you? That sounds great. This is almost turning into the producers, right? The producers, like as if we want to fail and somehow make a lot of money through failure, as if we set up some scheme where we have so much investment in this that if we just make it fail overnight, we can just keep all the investment and there's no harm, no foul. And maybe strangely, this will turn out to be a major hit, and then we're screwed. So someone is also in the restaurant. There's a lot of people in this pastrami restaurant, and it looks like an attractive what? An attractive man or an attractive woman? Well, there's no difference here. Let's just go with man. We'll try woman next time. And pardon me, someone recognizes us. So someone who has a beautiful smile. Oh, okay. So someone who was in supporting roles, but is on the verge of becoming a star. And we're going to have a name for this person. Let's just go with Vincent. And then Vincent Cooper, Vincent Patel, Vincent Lane, oh, it doesn't matter. Just stick with Cooper, Vincent Cooper. Vincent Cooper, referring to the cutting job I did. I liked our editing. Wow, that never happens. And recognizes Fish, such a privilege. This is nice, you know. And has heard about our desire to start a new studio. Can we trust Vincent? Vincent is, of course, working at another studio. For all I know, he's a spy for some rival studio. Okay, so now we're touching on the paranoia again. We're characterizing Hollywood industry and those who are in it as being quite paranoid people. And of course that's, you for those who are in who do feel that way, they do feel justified. Like I was saying before, everyone wants to get in. It's so competitive that once someone's in, they may have this like sense of themselves as, okay, I've made it, and now what I need to do is prevent others from making it, because there's only a few slots here and everyone's gunning for me because I was gunning for them, and now they're all gunning for me because now I've made it. It's unfortunate, but it just seems to be part of the reality of the industry. But since I think that's wrong, that's kind of the wrong attitude to have. Let's go with that for Daisy Flack. Where let's be cold here. You have to speak to my personal manager. I can't hire anybody on the spot. Yeah, I'm just very, very, very closed-minded. Like I'm basically becoming the man I walked out on. Like I'm becoming Lloyd Krogan, the one who's going to sit behind the desk and just sneer at everybody. Okay. So Vincent, well, he's being pretty good. He says, would you mind if he sits in on the story meeting? No. This work of genius that I'm coming up with that no one's ever heard of. Like we need to protect this, right? Because as soon as anyone hears that we're doing a languidly paced downer romantic comedy set in Morocco with a very intellectual, illusory kind of script style, everyone's going to want a piece of it, right? Okay, so that's understandable, and he leaves. So Vincent's gone. Maybe we'll never see Vincent again. Ensemble cast, yes. Now, who are these characters? So, all right, so now we're gonna have a movie about socialites. Yes, socialites, because we want to have social satire in this as well. Social satire, probably the least appealing form of comedy in terms of like commercial interest. Worse than romantic comedy. Like social satire is probably the least commercial form of comedy there is. So let's go with that. They're socialites. And what's the word that describes them? Bashful sounds terrible because bashful, I mean, that's not even fun. Like if they were just jerks, like scheming and bumbling and dangerous, those are things that would actually be appealing. That would actually fulfill like the social satire aspect of it. So even though very few people will want to see a social satire, those who do go to see a social satire, they will want to see characters who are scheming and bumbling and dangerous. They would not want to see characters who are bashful. So we're going to come up with a failed social satire so it's the bashful socialites. Terrible. They're a group of bashful socialites. Now let's talk about a writer. I'm going to write this myself. That's the terrible decision. Wonderful. Now we need a title. So we have choices here. And The Marriage Diaries, The Ballroom Tale, The Widow Critchfield's Honeymoon. Okay, see more titles. Dead Valley. Miserable Houses. I mean, titles are things that I think aren't really that important. I know that sounds weird, but think about it. Citizen Kane, is that a great title? Not really. Star Wars. I was recently looking at Carrie Fisher, who was Princess Leia in Star Wars, in her memoirs of making Star Wars. Remember a time, does anyone remember a time before Star Wars when people first heard the title Star Wars? And Carrie Fisher was saying when that title was thrown around, people thought, what is this? This is a movie about celebrities punching each other in the boxing ring or something like that. Like, what is Star Wars? Like, what the hell is that? But of course, when you see the coming attraction and then you see the movie and then you got the logo, like all those other things, now you're conveying like what the movie is. And suddenly Star Wars just seems like a perfect title. Even though, before people knew what Star Wars was, they just hear those words Star Wars and they think all kinds of weird things. Like, is that a great title by itself? I don't know. So in a way, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to pick randomly the title of this. The Green Promise. Could be a classic, could be a piece of junk, doesn't matter. Okay, The Green Promise. That's settled then. Now, who wants a milkshake?